the reason I got interested in you is I had heard that um, much of your job, or at least a lot of your research work, you're interviewing terrorists or former terrorists. I know you're going in there as an academic, but on a human level, what is that like? I mean, do you ever find yourself judging these people or empathizing with them in any way?
That's a great question. Lots of things go through your mind,
Yeah.
to say the least. Um, Empathy is a difficult one. Sometimes people, I think, confuse empathy with sympathy. It is important to listen to what they have to say. It's important, in as much as it's realistic, to try to put yourself in that person's shoes, to get a sense of how they see the world and how they try to explain what they do. But I think there's a fine line between trying to understand that and trying to listen carefully to their account without necessarily sympathizing with them. It can be challenging, because I think even the most well-meaning of researchers will, myself included, will all have our biases. We'll all have our preconceived ideas about, how the world is, and it can be difficult to place that aside. Um, you introduced me as someone who interviews terrorists. I wish I could do more of it. I mean, it's still relatively rare, even within my field, and that is
Mm.
because there's a wide range of pretty complicated issues that go into trying to arrange these interviews. We don't, as a research community, we don't do it nearly enough, and it's because it's largely quite challenging to do. But it is possible, and they will meet with us. For the most part, it's former terrorists. It's people who they've gotten involved, they've done things, they have, again, for the most part, they have been apprehended, arrested, they've served some time, and then they tend to make themselves available to researchers. But
Well,
it's
why
something I
is
think
it?
we. Sorry, go
Sorry,
ahead.
I can imagine, I guess, certain challenges with that, but is it challenging legally, or do these people not want to generally talk to academics?
Believe it or not, it tends to be the opposite. People tend to be quite cooperative and facilitative. Now, that's not to say that they don't necessarily have some kind of agenda. I mean, my agenda is, as a researcher, is to get you to talk to me because I want to learn about it and I want to write about it and teach about it. If a person is, for example, disillusioned and is on the path to rehabilitation, 9 times out of 10 they want to talk because they want to share their story. They want to, show the world that they are genuine and sincere about this new pathway that they are on. um, but we're just as likely to get access to people who still are deeply wedded and committed to those radical beliefs. And so, from their perspective, they might be trying to use a researcher as nothing more than a platform for propaganda. So as a researcher, you have to be really careful about, whether or if and how you are being used.
That's an interesting point, because when that happens, I mean, is that an obvious sign that someone who's deeply committed is using you, or I mean, what preventative techniques do you have for that?
They're not necessarily aware that they are using a researcher, and very often a researcher isn't necessarily aware that he or she is being used. I mean, when I was a 20 years ago, when I was a graduate student starting off with this, I would, interview IRA members, members of the Irish Republican Army in Ireland, where I'm from. I thought at the time that I was getting very good interviews simply because these guys were sitting down with me and talking to me. But it was only afterwards I realized that it was all propaganda. They would spend time, answering my questions with reference to history and politics, and I, because I didn't really know what I was doing at the time, I couldn't really see that it was really more propaganda than anything psychologically based.